Hey, Step Back History, Tristan here. This one's going to be a bit depressing, so I expect mad views. So we're in the last home stretch towards the American midterms next Tuesday. A little bit more about that later. And Donald Trump has been throwing out all of his campaign help as much as possible. And one of the things that came up recently is that he's going to push for a repeal of birthright citizenship. This has been a thorn in the side of a lot of anti-immigration people for a long time. But yeah, they're going to try and push to make being born in America no longer a criteria for American citizenship. Going as far as to even try to make it retroactive, which would mean that it would take away citizenship from people, which you can't do unless there are specific circumstances. But either way, this is the plan that's going to go forward. And I started to think, what's the basis? What's the legal basis for this birthright citizenship? I know that not a lot of countries do it. Canada and America, I think, are the only ones that do, at least in the Western world. And what is like the origin of it and why does America have it? So it has to do with the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Anyone who's taken a basic US history course will know that 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are quite touchy. The 14th Amendment was put into action in 1868, so I think you already know what we're going to be dancing around. For those who aren't gigantic nerds of American history, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were the three constitutional amendments that were put forth basically around the end of the American Civil War in order to end slavery and assure even the most basic rights for black people. The repealing of naturalization rights is going to be, at least in part, done by trying to neuter the 14th Amendment, which would mean that they're already going to start messing with stuff that was put in place in order to end slavery. Now, the 14th Amendment itself was put in place as a direct repudiation of something that's called the Dred Scott decision. I'm only going to talk about it in real brief, so if there is a crash course or a Mr. Beat video about it, I'll put a link here. But the Dred Scott decision was made during the time of slavery and basically established that black people do not have the rights of citizens. And why would they need to repudiate the Dred Scott decision? You know, even setting aside the horrible moral outrage that it should put in everybody these days, even though sadly it won't. Well, when the 13th Amendment was passed and the Civil War was over, the United States started the slow and bitter process of reincorporating the former Confederate states. This took quite a while, and one of the requirements in order to reintegrate the southern states into the United States was to ban slavery. But you know, since this was a war about states' rights, the former Confederate states resisted the attempts to end slavery in America using terrorism if they had to. Ku Klux Klan, everybody. But on top of that, in order to establish white supremacy after the Civil War without slavery, they started putting in what were called black codes. These were explicit laws that were designed to disenfranchise and heavily curtail the position of black people in the South in order to more or less put them back into the place where they were before the end of slavery. Basically trying to reinstate the status of white supremacy that they had before the war. Because, you know, states' rights. So the 14th Amendment was put in place in order to at least try to repeal those black codes. Constitutional amendment was basically put in place in order to force this upon the South. And the 14th Amendment covers all sorts of territory. It's where the Equal Protection Clause comes from. It's all sorts of important things. But the one that's important for this one in particular is the Citizenship Clause. And basically what it says is that if you were born or naturalized in the United States, you are a citizen. This was the way that they could say, yes, even black people are citizens. But of course, just like after the Civil War, and just like now, this is not about citizenship. This is coming at a time in the Trump administration where the campaign for the midterms is leading to a more and more overtly racist agenda. For example, a week ago, unfortunately it got a little skipped over because of last week's events, the Caravan is a story in the news cycle of a group of people who are trying to get to the United States in order to claim asylum. Completely legal. This is a completely normal and legal thing to do, based entirely on laws that we put in place after World War II in order to prevent the Holocaust. But of course, Trump is calling this an invasion, sending literal soldiers to the border to protect them against people fleeing for their lives, and also throwing in the whole, there are some Middle Easterners in there too, which is not based at all in reality and shows that the whole terrorism dog whistle is basically gone. And on top of that, Trump not too long ago said he's not against immigration. He just doesn't want immigrants from quote unquote shithole countries and wants more from countries like Norway. This is not about not wanting immigrants, which, you know, a lot of the comments, but because they haven't watched this far, are probably going to say. They're going to be like, oh, this isn't racist. We just want to, you know, defend our borders and protect immigrants. Trump doesn't want to stop immigration. He wants to stop immigration of non-white people. So are we okay? Like, are we going to be able to hold up the 14th Amendment? You know, it's a constitutional amendment. It's strong. It's one of the more well-defended constitutional amendments out there. I don't see how Trump could possibly defeat a constitutional amendment, except that the 9 people who are put into a position to arbitrate what is and is not constitutional is now run by a far-right conservative majority thanks to Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Yeah, so that super duper sucks. I kind of said this in the Brett Kavanaugh video, that now that Brett Kavanaugh is a justice, you're going to see some of the things that you thought were safe and foundational steps of progress in America starting to get rooted up and turned back. And I said it would go all the way back to like the Civil War amendments. People in the comments said I was an idiot. And like, no, they're just gonna like get rid of things like Roe v. Wade, which, you know, is bad enough as it is. But no, now they're going for the 14th Amendment, an amendment that was literally put in place to stop the explicit discrimination against black people. Like, who knows where they're gonna go at this point. Anyways, the midterms are close, and I'm going to be doing a nice special on it. So if you haven't been watching Step Back Tonight, it's a weekly Tuesday night show that I do for 3 hours where I talk to the audience or I do various things. This Tuesday is election night, and so we're going to have a live election show, and we're going to talk about some stuff. I'm going to see if I can find, maybe rustle up a guest or two. And yeah, it's going to be a big thing. Anyways, bye.